This is my review of the third Lions test. Well, obviously, the first thing to mention is that it ended in a draw, which was disappointing for both sides in the end, 15-all. The All Blacks may well be ruining the ref's final decision not to award a penalty, although personally I feel that was the right call. So a draw was the right result from this match, although it does disappoint both sides. Both teams had a number of opportunities to win the match. For the All Blacks, Beauden Barrett again was not perfect from the boot and had a number of kickable opportunities which went amiss. Meanwhile, for the Lions, they failed to profit from Jerome Kano's yellow card, only scoring 3 points in the time he was off the pitch. Also, Owen Farrell threw a intercepted pass when the Lions had a great period of sustained pressure early on in the match, which led to the All Blacks running all the way up to the other end of the field and a complete change in territory. There was also an occasion where the Lions decided to take a quick tap penalty on the halfway line with plenty of room out wide, which looked like it could have been a guaranteed try. However, Owen Farrell again was responsible for missing his pass to Anthony Watson. It was an exciting end to the series, and whilst no one comes out of it celebrating, I think the Lions will be able to look back on it as a successful result really from the tour once they put it into context and see that they haven't lost the tour against New Zealand, which is what many people were expecting before the tour started and even after it had started. What many people have been saying is that the result protects the Lions brand, and although this isn't something we like to talk about, it is good for rugby in general that the Lions continue to be strong and that the tours are interesting and competitive. Now on to player ratings. So number 1 was Mako Vunipola. After his yellow card last week, there was a chance that he could have been dropped from the team. However, Warren Gatland kept faith with him because apart from the yellow card, he has had a good series so far, and again he showed that. The Lions scrum did struggle early in the game with the starting front row, and there were a number of times where the scrum went backwards, but in open play, Mako Vunipola had a very good game, lots of carrying and making big tackles. So he is going to get a 7 out of 10 from me because he had a solid all-round performance, although his scrummaging was slightly weak. However, it wasn't really his side of the scrum that was going back, if anything. Now, number 2, Jamie George, had also a generally good game, although towards the end his line-out throwing was starting to go amiss. There were a couple of occasions before he was brought off where he decided to, or the line-out decided to go to the back, and twice in a row, I think, the line-outs were not straight, giving possession to the All Blacks. Now this will be disappointing for him because it's one of his strengths and where he's been good on this tour. However, it did allow a fresh front row to be brought on, which seemed to help with the scrummaging, and following last week when he played 80 minutes, getting subbed wasn't actually a bad thing this week, I don't think. So for his overall performance, again, I'm going to give a 7 out of 10. Then number 3, Tyke Furlong, that completed the front row. He again was strong in open play. However, in the scrum, it mainly seemed to be his side where penalties were being given and his side which was being driven back. However, he had a positive influence overall on the match. So he's going to get 6 out of 10 from me. The second rows performed very well again, following on from last week's performance. Maro Itoje had a very strong game, making a number of turnovers, and this week he improved his discipline, which is what many were calling for, and I don't think he gave away a single penalty during the match. So this was a good improvement for him, one of the things people had wanted him to work on. He was calling the lineouts, and overall he had a good sense of control today. His athleticism to get round the pitch and rip the ball in tackle and get over rucks, be the first man there, gives the Lions almost an extra back rower rather than the typical second rower. And this is what they were missing in the first test, I think. So his performance today is going to get him an 8 out of 10. Another good performance and meriting the decision to bring him in the second test and keep him for the third test. Alan Wynne-Jones did little wrong, and probably his most significant contribution of the day was being hit by Jerome Kano in the head to get Kano sin-binned. This occurred perhaps at the time when Alan Wynne-Jones would have been subbed for Courtney Laws anyway, around the 50-minute mark. So ultimately it was a positive for the Lions in the situation of taking him off. He wasn't as outstanding as Maratoje, although you wouldn't expect it from him. He was solid and did what was asked of him throughout the match, so he's going to get a 7 out of 10, although again he only gets the 50 minutes on the pitch while Maro played the full 80. In the back row, Sam Warburton had a great captain's display, and perhaps the highlight of him as the captain was managing to convince the referee at the end to look at the TMO, confirm his decision, and eventually reassess his decision to switch from offside to accidental offside, reducing the offence from a penalty to a scrum, and therefore saving the Lions by not giving Beauden Barrett an opportunity to kick a penalty. This was vital in stopping the Lions from suffering a disappointing defeat, and that was amongst many other things where he acted well as the captain of the team. However, it wasn't just his captaincy that was good today. He had a good all-round performance as the blindside flanker, and shifted to open side flanker in the second half when Sean O'Brien went off. He was constantly competing for the ball and a thorn in the All Blacks side. This competition around the breakdown is perhaps what Peter O'Mahony couldn't give, and again shows that Warren Gatland made a good decision with his team selection for the second and third tests. Across to open side flanker, Sean O'Brien had a good first half, although much less eventful than the previous two tests. Perhaps his quietest game, he was withdrawn at half-time due to injury and replaced with CJ Stander, who came in on the blind side. I'm not actually sure why Sean O'Brien went off, but he didn't reappear for the second half, and hopefully he'll be alright. So he didn't have his best game of the tour, but still an alright performance. So he's going to get a 6 out of 10. Tulupe Faletau was one of the standout players today. He made a couple of big hits on Beauden Barrett, turning the ball over both times. One of which was an impressive covering tackle where he managed to get off the base of the scrum quickly, even after it had been wheeled, and stop Beauden Barrett from what was otherwise a good try-scoring opportunity. He had a good game round the pitch, making big carries and always beating the gain line. And there were a number of occasions where he managed to do well, picking the ball off the back of the scrum and taking in the first defender before giving it out to the scrum half or fly half at the time. So for his good performance today, he's going to get a 7.5 out of 10. Conor Murray again impressed with the boot. Whilst there are a couple of his kicks which didn't go exactly where he'd hoped, you can rely on him to produce kicks which either gain a lot of territory or he produces good kicks which are kicks to compete. There are a couple of occasions where Elliot Daly and Anthony Watson did manage to compete for the ball and occasionally even win it. His distribution, as always, was good, and he was always at the ruck on time. The Lions did well to keep the rucks quite fast at times and give him good ball, which helped. As mentioned last time, his relationship with Johnny Sexton helps with giving an intuitive nature to their performances. And so Conor Murray is going to get a 7.5 out of 10 today. Johnny Sexton seemed to get injured just after halfway through the first half, and there were a few occasions following that where he ended up back down on the ground. They did take him off for a head injury assessment. While it didn't actually seem like he'd hurt his head, it more seemed like an opportunity to treat him for 10 minutes or however long it took, whilst still maintaining the opportunity to bring him back on afterwards, which they did. Eventually he was brought off for Ben Teo, however he had a good performance whilst he was on the pitch. When he did get injured, it seemed like he might have been a liability, as he wasn't especially mobile, and every time he did get hit in the tackle, he seemed to struggle to get up afterwards. However, his distribution was good, and there were a number of kicks he made, one of which was an extremely high kick which Elliot Daly managed to chase down and catch, I think. So overall his performance was quite good. There was one occasion I remember where he didn't manage to kick a penalty to touch, which lost the Lions a lot of field position and would overall be quite disappointing for him. However, his general performance was good, so he's going to get a 7 out of 10. Outside him, Owen Farrell had another good game. When he switched to fly half, it didn't seem to affect his performance at all, and it was his steely nerve with the penalty kicking that earned the Lions a draw today. He scored 12 of the 15 points from penalties. He'll probably be disappointed with a couple of passes he made, one where there was an interception whilst attacking the New Zealand line after a sustained period of pressure early in the game, which could have seen the Lions score, and another where the Lions decided to take a quick tap and go penalty around the halfway line with lots of space out wide for Anthony Watson and Liam Williams, but he couldn't make the pass to Anthony Watson, and this butchered the opportunity really. So there's a couple of things that didn't go well for him, but they occurred relatively early on in the match, and he managed to get over those hurdles and continue to perform well in other areas of the game and keep his side in it with his boot without missing anything today, which was very important while Beauden Barrett was missing kicks at the other end. So he's another one who's going to get a 7 out of 10. Jonathan Davis, as always, a solid performance. He's perhaps been my player of the tour, as he seems like he can always be relied on, and he might be currently one of the only Lions players who would get into the All Blacks team. People were worried about him at the start and thought that maybe he wasn't the right selection. However, he did come into form towards the end of the season, helping Scarlets as they reached the final and won the Pro 12. He was being used today as a bit of a first-up runner from set plays such as lineouts and scrums, since Owen Farrell isn't really that kind of player, and so he was hitting in hard lines off Johnny Sexton. This probably isn't his biggest strength, but it did show his versatility, whilst his biggest strength may be the outside arc runs that he was making in the first test, for example. He seemed to be reliable as always, and you never felt he was going to make a mistake, so I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10. Now on to the wings. Elliot Daly had a mixed game. There were a number of good things that he did, but one moment that really sticks with me is where there was a deep kick by the All Blacks, which Elliot Daly attempted to field inside the pitch, but rather than catching it, he just spilt it into touch, ending up giving New Zealand territory and possession from that kick. So this was a particularly disappointing moment. There was little he could do for the try from Laumape, where Geordie Barrett just rose above him, since Barrett is a lot bigger than him, and there was little he could do there. However, in attack he did manage on a couple of occasions to win the competition in the air for the ball after a Johnny Sexton kick or Conor Murray kick. His penalty from inside his own half was absolutely amazing and shows that he really can do it at the highest stage, and why he is such a useful addition in the back three of any team. And this work in attack earns him a 7 out of 10. Anthony Watson again showed why he's a very dangerous winger. As with the previous two matches, every time he got the ball he was looking to jink around the All Blacks defence and work a way through. He didn't manage to make any breaks in particular, and one disappointing moment was where he tried to run around the All Blacks defence by running sideways and was just tackled. However, the outstanding moment from him was an offload which was given as a forward pass, although it didn't look forward to me from the camera angle shown, and this could have led to a try in the end, so it was quite disappointing that that was given forward. So Anthony Watson's going to get a 7 out of 10. Liam Williams, as before, his weakness was the high ball today. There was one occasion where he went up, caught it uncomfortably, but then was hit and knocked it on. And another where he just could not field the kick. So for a fullback, this does not seem to be his biggest strength, and is a bit disappointing as part of his all-round game. However, what he does offer is obviously an extra man in attack, and again he showed this running lots of lines, integrating into the back line well throughout the match. However, for his inability to field the kicks 100% of the time, he's going to get a 6.5 out of 10. The bench today performed well, particularly I would say the front row. Once Kyle Sinclair, Ken Owens and Jack McGrath came on, they solidified the scrum and even managed to somehow win a scrum penalty deep in the Lions' half at a crucial time. Ken Owens managed to come on for Jamie George after George had started missing his throws, and immediately after he came on, Owens managed to send in a perfect throw to the back of the line-out. This was exactly what was needed for the Lions at the time, and along with the solidity in the scrum, helped to stabilise the set piece for the Lions. Sinclair and McGrath both added energy around the pitch for the tiring Lions front row. While Sinclair was not able to have the destructive runs that he has in the past, there was an occasion where he made a good pass which almost set the Lions away. In the second row, Courtney Laws came on for Alan Wynne-Jones around the 50-minute mark, but was moved across to blindside flanker temporarily after Sam Warburton had to go off for a head injury assessment. He again played well and showed why he's earned his call-up into the main Test squad. CJ Stander came on at half-time, which is earlier than he probably had expected, having not even come on in the previous Test. He didn't do anything wrong, I don't think, and provided another good ball-carrying option, more so than what Sean O'Brien can give, with Sam Warburton moving to open side flanker. So it changed the balance of the back row a bit, but not in a bad way. Rhys Webb came on around the 70th minute for Conor Murray and just helped to maintain the energy that a scrum half needs to get round the pitch from ruck to ruck and maintain fast ball. There was a particular occasion where he did extremely well to make a turnover with Owen Farrell, holding up an All Blacks player and forcing it into a maul, which was then followed with a collapse and a Lions scrum. Ben Teo came on temporarily for Johnny Sexton's head injury and then came on permanently towards the end. He couldn't have the big impact that he might have hoped, but he did give a route one ball which Jonathan Davis had been trying to provide earlier on, but he's obviously a very powerful man and gave the Lions a good first runner option. Jack Knoll came on for Anthony Watson, which I wasn't very happy with as a decision, seeing as Liam Williams seemed to be the one struggling most. So I probably would have brought Jack Knoll on for Liam Williams maybe, but it was the last 5 minutes, so he wasn't able to have much impact on the game and didn't get involved in much action. Now overall this year's Lions Tour has been a success, I would say, and it's been good that it has been a competitive tour, and hopefully this will continue in the future. Although I think New Zealand at the moment are the only ones who are able to compete with the Lions really. What we can hope for is that in 2021 South Africa will have improved and there will be another competitive Lions Tour. Nothing gets more competitive than a drawn series, I suppose. I will be continuing to make videos after the tour, so do like, comment and subscribe.